Welcome to WebGoat's A3 SQL Injection Advanced, where today, our goal is to gain access to the account of a user other than ourselves. There isn't too much new material to cover before we start, but I do need to mention the union operator. In SQL, you can union a table to another table to display the rows from both tables. The only restriction on this is that both tables must have the same amount of columns and rows as one another. There is a workaround, as if one table has less columns than the other, you can select null as the remaining columns to union the table. Note that the completion of this module requires basic knowledge of Python, and with that, let's get into the module. So for this section, we're asked to retrieve all data from the user system data table. After doing this, we have to find Dave's password. So let's start off by using what we learned in the last video and ending the string for the input. After this, we can union select all the columns from the user system data table, but as you might notice, the user data table has 3 more columns than this table. So we're going to individually select all 4 columns, and then select 3 columns that is just going to be null as F1, null as F2, and null as F3. What you actually call the column doesn't matter, we're just doing this to make sure it has the same amount of columns as the user data table. Finish off the SQL statement, and then make sure to add comments to the end so it comments out the rest of the line. Once you hit Get Account Info, you'll see the table of all users. From this table, you can just copy and paste Dave's password into the Check Password field. Okay, now, moving into the next section, we can see that it's asking us to log in as Tom. If you're looking for where to start, you can find in the hints that the vulnerable field is the username field of the register form. Let's try a few things to figure out how this works. First, I'm going to try closing off the string and saying or 1 equals 1. And then once I enter in an email and password, I can hit register and find out that that's probably not going to work. So let's try a similar method. Let's say or 1 doesn't equal 2. Same result. What we can try now is putting Tom and then closing the string, which sets the input username to Tom, and then saying that the first character of the password has to equal T. Once we do this, we can see that it says the user already exists. So now we know our method of attack, and we know that his password starts with T. If you're wondering why this works, the SQL statement in the backend when you log in pulls all users where the username equals the username that you input, and then compares the password you input with the password of the user that it pulled. In other words, whatever we put into the username field of the register form is put into a standalone statement, meaning if we inject our own SQL, there's no other statements that run afterwards. So let's go over to VS Code and write a Python script to exploit this. I'm going to start by inserting my WebGoat session ID, as well as the URL endpoint that we're trying to contact. Next, I'm going to create a headers object, and don't worry when you see this, the only thing that changes here is the cookie header. As far as you're concerned, you don't have to change anything inside this object. However, every header is required for authentication. Next, we're going to initialize a new variable to hold the password, and we're going to start a new loop that's going to go from 1 to 25, and that's what we're going to use to tell the SQL statement how much of the password field we're comparing to. Inside this, we're going to start another loop, and it's going to go through all the letters of the alphabet. Now we're going to create our parameters for the request, which is going to increase the length of the substring that it checks every time the first loop runs. It's also going to give the server the currently saved password, as well as the current letter that we're on. Next, we're going to send the request, and if the data from the request contains the words already exist, we know that what we have so far is the first length amount of characters in his password. So I'm going to add the current letter onto the password we have, print what we have so far, and then break to skip to the next iteration of the loop. Otherwise, if the data from the response doesn't have the words already exists, it's going to continue on with the loop. After the loop finishes, I just print a couple of new lines, and then I have it say password found as well as the password. Note that I saved this script under the name getpass.py. So now we can run it in the command line by using the command python3 and then the name of the file. In this case, getpass.py. And oh boy, can you see it's fast. All we have left to do is go back to the module and log in with the username Tom, and then copy and paste the password we got into the password field. I'm going to leave the last section up to you so you can test the skills you've gained so far. And after you complete that, hopefully congratulations, you've successfully learned the advanced concepts of SQL injection. Thank you so much for watching this video. And if you're struggling through this content as much as I did for the first time, make sure to subscribe. I have a video on the walkthrough for every module, as well as explain the basics of each module you need to know before you start.